The Week in Bible Prophecy, a Prophecy Watchers podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to the Prophecy Watchers podcast. I am here in studio with Olivier Melnick. Welcome, Olivier.
Well, thank you for having me on the show.
And we are going to be talking about a very important topic. And really, before we do, I want to remind everybody about our upcoming prophecy conference in Orlando, Florida. I mean, who wouldn't want to go to Orlando in basically March 1st? I mean, especially those in the north.
Good time of the year.
Yeah, good time of the year to be there. And OrlandoProphecySummit.com. We have over 20 speakers that are going to be there. You can go to the website and register. You can go to see all who is speaking there. And just be on the lookout. We have a lot going on. We have another conference coming up in June in Colorado Springs. Olivier, you're going to be there on that one.
I think so, yeah.
And so, again, lots going on, everybody. And the topic today, which we think is extremely important, is, if we talk about anti-Semitism, sometimes people can be maybe a little shocked by that. Oh, that's something I'm not really interested in. But maybe let's phrase it in a positive way for a moment. How would we, instead of being anti-something, what would be the positive?
Well, the opposite of anti-Semitism is philo-Semitism, which means loving the Jews. But what's interesting, Mondo, is that the word Semite basically comes from the descendants of Shem, the one of the three sons of Noah. And when you use the word Semite or Semitic, from Semitic descent, you are describing Jews and Arabs.
Yeah.
But when
amazing.
you use the word anti-Semitic, it's only for Jews.
Yep. I'm glad you did that, because I actually had that question this week. We get a lot of questions, and somebody had written in and asked, well, where does this come from? When they looked it up, they saw what you said was, one of the sons of Noah. And I said, well, again, you have the way, you have the etymology of the word, but then you have the use of the word, and the use is only of Jewish people, because in languages you talk about Semitic languages, Hebrew and Arabic and other things. But
and anti-Semitism, by the way, the word itself is fairly recent. It's less than 200 years old. I think it was coined in 1867 by a German guy by the name of Wilhelm Marr, who just he decided to use the word to explain how people could protect themselves from this Jewish race. And so it was Antisemitismus in German, and that's the first time it was used. And then it got a life of its own, and it is what it is now. But anti-Semitism as a concept, as a form of hatred against the Jews, has existed since you can make a case for it since the first Jew.
Since the first Jew, and it's interesting too that I like what you said earlier, just the idea of, I think if anti-Semitism is against, or it's anti-something, but to be even a supporter of Israel or pro-Israel or a lover of Israel, let's talk about that for a moment in the sense of, as a Christian who loves the Scripture, who believes the Bible, why should our default, okay, and that doesn't mean that we endorse everything every Jew has ever done, just like we would endorse what every Gentile has ever done, or Italian or Chinese. But why should the default for a biblical, spirit-filled, born-again Christian, why should our default be in support of Israel?
Good question. I think it starts with your approach to the Bible itself. Anybody who has an allegorical, symbolic approach to the Bible, where it can mean whatever you want it to mean on a different day or to different people, they're going to have a lot of trouble reconciling a lot of passages. But if you take a grammatical, historical approach to the Bible and pay attention to the context, you cannot avoid the fact that Israel is all over the Bible, and God has a plan for mankind that revolves around the Jewish people. I often tell people, look at the first book of the Bible, 50 chapters in Genesis. The first book of the Bible, 11 chapters on mankind and 39 chapters on Israel.
Yep.
Does that tell you anything? Do you think God wants to, maybe from the word go, give us an idea that he is going to put an emphasis on the Jewish people, not because we're better, not because we're more numerous. Actually, in His Word, He says, "I chose you not because you're numerous, you're a small people, but because of that's what I want to do. I want to use you to be a light to the nations." Mind you, we haven't done a very good job at that. That's for another time, maybe.
Well, to me, it's it's fascinating, as you said. It comes back to the Bible. I mean, John 4:22. Jesus is speaking to the Samaritan woman. He goes, "You don't. I have it right here. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship. For salvation is of the Jews." I think as well that Paul addresses this in Romans 9, where he says, "Well, what advantage does the Jew have? Oh, they have all kinds of advantages that God gave them." But again, he looked at the world and he decided, I'm going to send my son, of course, in eternity past. And he chose Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But as we come down, the question, I think, or that for me in my mind is, Jesus has Jewish, or when he was here, Jewish blood. He has Jewish DNA.
In his humanity, he was a Jew.
Humanity, yes.
He's the only Jew who kept the 613 commandments perfectly.
Yep. Why wouldn't we love Jesus, our Savior, who I would say he still is Jewish?
Yeah.
And his Jewish family, his Jewish brethren. Did Jesus hate the Jews?
Did Jesus hate the Jews? Of course not.
Of course not. Why would he, right?
Not. Now, it's interesting you had said that, because I was having a conversation with our good friend Andy Woods this morning, talking about the synagogue of Satan and of your father, the devil. And when people tell me like, well, there's obviously the New Testament is anti-Semitic, and there's a case to be made for hating the Jews. I have to bring people back to the reality that those passages, whoever speaks to these people, they are Jewish, yes, but they're speaking to sinners who are missing the mark first, who happen to be Jewish second.
Yes.
Their ethnicity has no bearing on their sin. But that's the way the world is looking the other way. They believe today that the ethnicity of the Jewish people is the cause of their sin, and that's why we should destroy them.
That's a great point, because it's a definition. Anti-Semitism is racism, and when we talk about racism, it's stereotyping a certain person automatically just by, again, their genetics or whatever. So, in that regard, you hear people saying, "Well, what about George Soros?" Okay, he's a sinful Jewish person.
Yeah.
What about Bill Clinton? He's a sinful Gentile person. So just to say that.
What about you and me?
Exactly.
I'm a sinful Jew. We've been forgiven. We've been redeemed. But
you know what? I'm actually 50% French. So you're.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. so we're all my family's from the south of France, but So we're sinful French people, or I got a part Hispanic, so whatever. But to say that just because somebody has this ethnic distinction, now all of a sudden automatically A, B, C, D, C, that's racism.
Right, of course. And again, we are sinners first, and we happen to be whatever ethnicity we come from, and that shouldn't have no bearing on our sin. We don't need ethnicity or need any kind of background to be sinners. We're sinners from birth.
Yeah. Let's talk about, give us, the audience here who might not know kind of some of the things. First of all, tell them, I would like them to know, how can they find you, how can they find you online to learn more about your ministry? And then let's talk about some of the books that you've written up until this current book that you just got.
Well, I post a lot of information on two sites. One is where I put my articles. It's newantisemitism.com. And also I've got a lot of videos, devotional videos on anti-Semitism, end times prophecy on my YouTube channel, Olivier Melnick, Today Through Jewish Eyes.
Yeah, because you're obviously a prophecy expert in that regard too. So you talk about broad things, but certainly Israel.
Right. So that's they can find, and my books are on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So and you carry some.
Yeah, in our bookstore, absolutely.
Yes.
Buy from us, not a bookstore.
And thank you for that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. The end times anti-Semitism. What did you do there in that book?
What do you? Oh, end times. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, end times anti-Semitism is two books prior to this one that I just published this year. End times anti-Semitism it's an overview of the history of anti-Semitism from basically. I speak a little bit about, Haman and Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, and the Amalekites. And then I move move forward to the anti-Nicene church fathers, the early church fathers, who took the scriptures and allegorized and decided that they were starting to slowly distance themselves from the Jews, and that's what I call the first kind of anti-Semitism, the theological anti-Judaism. It was not really against the Jews, but it was like us and them. So I cover theological anti-Judaism. I cover classical anti-Semitism, racial anti-Semitism, which is when what led the Nazis to kill 6 million Jews. Then we move to the new anti-Semitism. End times anti-Semitism is where we are right now, and I cover that too. And I even talk about the last chapter, which hasn't been written yet. What's been written but it hasn't been played is the tribulation anti-Semitism. So I do an overview in that book of all those chapters in the history of anti-Semitism. Some of them past, some of them present, and some of them future. And I spend a little time also sharing with Christians how they can make a difference and fight it and speak up and against anti-Semitism and build bridges. You can use anti-Semitism when you fight it properly to build bridges between Christians and a Jewish community.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that seems to me, you know this, but my undergrad was in Jewish studies, so we studied a lot of Jewish history and at Moody, but to me it was fascinating to watch how the reality of church persecution and anti-Semitism, and how that closed the bridge. I mean, destroyed the bridge.
It burned the bridge.
It burned the bridge. Yeah, there's nothing there. And the goal here, I mean, one of the reasons why we're talking about this is because, October 7th, it's kind of going to be a new day. It's going to be a new date, like America has September 11th. For Israel, certainly there's a lot of dates of wars, but something October 7th. Talk about it.
Well, October 7th, if there's anybody in your audience not aware of what took place, is basically a massive terrorist attack from the Gaza Strip in the southwest part of Israel, moving into Israel and going into several different kibbutzim, the community, the commune where Jewish people live together and work together, and also some private homes.
And there was a party going on down there too.
And there was a also that I forgot about that. The concert, the peace concert,
a peace concert,
260. And what's interesting is that at that concert there were a lot of people that were Jewish people that were not necessarily in favor of everything that Israel is standing for.
Kind of pro-Gaza. I mean, many of them were very
not pro-Gaza, but pro-Palestinian, maybe pro-two-state solution. And doesn't matter. You're Jewish, you're gone. And so originally 1,400 people. 1,200 now. About a week ago, the Israeli government brought it down to 1,200 because they were able to recognize the bodies better. Which it's amazing to me. I bring it up because it shows the spirit of the Israeli government and the IDF. They went for 1,400, which was really bad. The highest Jewish casualty since the Holocaust. But then they revised it to 1,200.
They didn't inflate it.
The hospital that got the missile that fell on the hospital that, Israel was accused of it. And of course, very quickly we found out there was, a dud that fell on the hospital from Hamas. They said that originally 500 people died, and the hospital was destroyed and it was Israel. Well, it was actually the parking lot and not 500 people died, but it doesn't matter because they always inflate. And Israel, in the midst of their tragedy, revised their numbers to be more accurate.
It's amazing the entire different perspective, even as it relates to the way that the war is handled and other things. I mean, here you have a specific target of just innocent people. Again, as we said, the killing, the butchering, the beheading, the putting babies in ovens. I mean, it's sick, it's wicked, it's evil. But what's the source of it? What's the source of this?
Satan.
Yeah.
It's, in my definition of anti-Semitism, I give Satan is 1 second of fame because I mentioned the demonic aspect or the satanic aspect of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is the irrational and satanic hatred of the Jewish people and Israel, characterized by thoughts, words and or deeds against them. And you see this over the centuries. And the question you could ask is, why is Satan so hell-bent, I should say, maybe not, hell-bent on going after the Jews? What does he have against the Jews? Well, if you look at the final chapter, what's going to happen, in the end times, which we're fast approaching, the last 7 years, known as the Great Tribulation, also known as the time of Jacob's trouble, where God is going to be disciplining Israel and chastising Israel. What's going to happen is that at the end of that tribulation, the Jewish people who are going to survive will call on Yeshua, going like, our fathers missed him at the first coming. He is the Messiah. We believe it. And they're going to say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Mm-hmm. Yeshua said, you will not see me again until you say those words. So what a lot of Christians don't necessarily connect the dots, but they need to understand this. Jesus is not coming back when all the Gentiles are saved and in all the numbers. Jesus is coming back when Israel calls him to return. And when he returns, Satan goes unemployed. And he doesn't like where he's being sent for retirement. It's not really Club Med.
No.
So he wants to stop it or postpone it. And that's what he's been doing. So he's been behind anti-Semitism for millennia. And he keeps reinventing or repackaging, I should say, repackaging anti-Semitism. So it comes from Hollywood, from academia, from governments, from individuals, from churches, from within the church. I mean, there's a case to be made for replacement theology, which is the false theology claiming that the church has replaced Israel in the promises of God. There's a case to be made that this is actually anti-Semitic, because it's basically pushing the Jews aside. And if you push the Jews aside, they're no longer in God's plan, then eventually we can get rid of them.
Yeah, it's certainly, I mean, if you think about a Christian they don't like replacement theology, they like the term fulfillment theology, but regardless, it's the same difference. It's the same difference. But, for them, we're not saying either that anybody that would be replacement theologians, that they're embracing the murder of Jewish people. Not necessarily.
No.
But it's interesting, though, that what people don't realize is that theology, the subtle nature of how it contributes to the full-blown or even the medium-blown ideas of anti-Semitism, for sure.
Well, I think they're facilitating the process.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you can take you take replacement theology, and I think that I called it that in one of my messages. Christian Palestinianism is replacement theology on steroids.
Yep.
It's like making Israel Palestine, making Jesus a Palestinian, not a Jew, and then changing everything. I think I don't know if you ever had him on your show, but the expert on Christian Palestinianism is Paul Wilkinson.
Oh.
You know who he is? No, he's a British guy. He's usually at the pre-trib. He's the expert on that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, but so there's what was the original question?
Well, we're kind of just laying the foundation, because where I do want to go is in your new book, The Normalization of Anti-Semitism, when the oldest hatred becomes a new normal. Let's talk about that for a minute, because in the book, how do you define normalization?
Normalization is, let me read it so it's not complicated. Normalization is the process by which something previously considered abnormal or unacceptable becomes perceived as normal. No, so normalization in a vacuum is not necessarily bad. The normalization of diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel
that's good.
Would be a good thing. Okay? But normalization of anti-Semitism, that's an oxymoron. And that's I think where we are today. The like I mentioned to you in another conversation, the Palestinian narrative, the agenda of the PLO and Arafat and the people in Fatah and Hamas and as first it was like, it got some pushback in the 60s, and eventually, pushing it enough, people bought the lie, and now they're basically in agreement that the Palestinians are the poor victims. The new anti-Semitism has switched the victims and the perpetrators. The Israelis are the new Nazis of the Middle East,
exactly.
and the Palestinians are the poor victims. And now the world is buying it. And I think, especially in the young people, as we see right now, the young people are completely blinded to the truth by their search for social justice.
And I will say this, that do I believe that the Palestinians are victims? Absolutely.
Oh, yes.
They're victims of Hamas.
Absolutely.
I mean, you think about the billions and billions and billions of dollars that has come in. And I mean, these people just need to be honest that, again, no one's saying Israel is perfect.
Nope.
But the fact of the matter is the billions of dollars come in. You have the Hamas leadership living in Qatar and other places. They're living in these penthouses. I mean, where's that money coming from? It's coming from the aid that's been given. And instead of, I read one report where the European Union went in and they were putting in pipes for water and, for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as they left, Hamas was digging up and using the pipes for rocket launchers. And so you have a lot of good from the world trying to help, but the people there, they're not getting helped.
No, and the question I have, Mondo, is what is the world? When you think about it, do you think the people sending the money and sending the materials for the infrastructure, you think they don't know? If you and I know,
if I know it, yeah,
exactly. If you and I know that they're doing what they're doing, those governments sending billions of dollars, they know as well, so they become co-perpetrators with Hamas. I know it sounds terrible, but they become co-perpetrators.
And they can posture all they want. We care about the Palestinian cause. They don't. If they do, there'd be some level of accountability by the United Nations. But people are getting bought off. It comes back to the love of money, as we know Scripture does. But one of the things that you do in the book, the different stages in the normalization. I want. This is powerful to me. Help people understand, because if they understand the stages, all of us can look inward and say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that maybe in my own mind or my own default position is participating in some of these stages. Talk about that.
Well, the 10 stages, it's very interesting, because when I work on the book, it took me a while to do my research and write the book, and then it was published, I think, early spring of 2023, and here are the 10 stages that I identify. Some of them come from the previous one; they go in order, but they also continue and overlap. So it's not a clear cut. It stops and the next one. It stops.
But
and
there's
the next
definitely
one.
a progression of intensity.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we start with apathy, which continues all the way through. So let me read you the 10 and I'll comment on that. Apathy, lack of education, low or incorrect reporting, desensitization, lack of accountability, empowerment, demonization of the defenders, persecution of the Jews and the defenders, encouragement to kill, and mass murder of Jews. And I'm going to need to need to revise my book, because until October 7th, it's in the book, it says all 9 are in place. The only one that hasn't been in place yet, but it will come in place when I'm thinking probably during the tribulation, is the mass murder of Jews. Well, 1,200 Jews in a couple of hours on October 7th is a mass murder of Jews. What does that amount to in American lives?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you do the proportion, it would be like America losing over 50,000 in one 2-hour period.
Right.
I mean, again, that's more than Vietnam War. So you think about that. How would the government America respond for a terrorist attack, maybe across the border, either from Canada or Mexico, doesn't matter. But they came in and slaughtered women, men, women, babies, children, all of it, over 50,000. It'd be a declaration of war, which is exactly...
they would ask for a ceasefire.
Well, that's see, but again, that's
double standards.
And we know that the media and the globalists have no conscience, because they do have double standards over.
Because
and over.
What's going to happen in Gaza if there is a ceasefire? Okay. Somebody put on the social network, if we have a ceasefire, does that mean the hostages go home? They go home for the weekend?
Yep.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
It's a regrouping.
Reorganizing. They're not getting much from outside Gaza anymore in terms of weapons, but God knows how much they have.
Yeah.
I mean,
and Israel has been very clear. Yeah, we'll have a ceasefire as soon as we'll stop the siege as soon as you release the hostages. It's no problem. Done.
Yeah. But they want to use the hostages as
shields or
currency
negotiating. Yeah,
and currency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, so those 10 are in place, and they need to be. Christians need to. They have a part they can play in that, because they can speak up, they can be vocal about every single step. Apathy, you see people go like, well, I don't know anybody Jewish, or I don't have any Jews in my neighborhood, or I live in small town America. And so they just go like, I'm not going to worry about it. It's not my fight. Or they don't care. And we have a lot. And of course, lack of education, you see this on all level of society. I mean, you see TV shows, you see people, I'm not going to name names because I don't like to do that. But there's people on TV shows that are more liberal shows when they make nonsense comments like the Holocaust was a white on white, who said that, but I'm not. Unless you want to say it,
no,
but I'm not. So there's a lot of misunderstanding of the Holocaust, and the low or incorrect reporting.
That's a key right there. Would this also include a lack of? Well, you have that under education, in the sense of reporting, but also understanding history.
Right, and understanding, I say this often. The anti-Semitism did not happen in a vacuum. We are today where we are because of a progression of anti-Semitism, of all the acts. You can actually look at the Jewish people, and that's kind of like what I do in a class that I teach on the history of the Jewish people. You can look at the history of the Jewish people through the lens of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And then look at all those events, like the church fathers, the Black Plagues, the Crusades, the Black Plagues, yep. Luther, the pogroms, the Holocaust, and all those different things. And just a few. You can look at Jewish history that way. And but the low or incorrect reporting is that a lot of times things happen in terms of anti-Semitic acts that are not reported as hate crimes.
Exactly.
And it's not even, it's either not reported or it's underreported. And that's for those who are reported. There's many events, anti-Semitic events, that the Jewish community doesn't even bother
to respond
reporting,
yep.
because they know it's not going to.
I just read a report that just a few days ago that if we're talking about hate crime or whatever, specifically under that, over 65% of hate crimes are anti-Semitic hate crimes. I mean, that's a huge amount for such a small, relatively small group by proportion. And again, this is where it comes back to, well, as we addressed, why it's satanic. It's satanic, and so the whole world lies under the sway and the power of the wicked one, right? 1 John 5:19. And so the fact that, and Jesus called him the ruler of the world in John 12, John 14, and John 16, over and over. So the fact that Satan is the ruler of this world presently and has so much influence, and by nature we're all children of wrath, we are sons of the devil. I mean, this is Ephesians 2. So you have this theology here. So when I look around, I go, wow, it's amazing that people, like you mentioned in John 8:44, they are doing the works of their father, the devil, who's a murderer from the beginning. And so you have this it's pervasive amongst everywhere. Again, many people have this negative attitude and they don't even know why. But the progression continues. Let's talk about for a moment, unless you want to talk about a different one, but the demonization of the defenders and how we've been seeing that right now post October 7th.
Right. I want to go back briefly, maybe to, I want to say a few words about the lack of accountability.
Okay.
Because people will commit acts of anti-Semitism and there's absolutely zero punishment. And it basically it leads to the next one, the empowerment. It emboldens people to do more. There was a case in France, I believe it was 2017, when this man threw this retired doctor, this woman, out of the window of her apartment to her death, screaming Allah Akbar, and threw her through the window, and she died. Her name was Sarah Halimi. She was a doctor and she was retired. So of course he was arrested, and in 2021 the Cour de Cassation, which is the highest court in France, kind of like the Supreme Court, decided that they were not even going to have a trial. It's not even like they were going to have a trial and he was not found guilty. They would say we're not even going to trial the man because he was smoking pot when he pushed her through the window, so he was not responsible. So we're not going to he's dismissed. We're not having a trial. Now, this on the backdrop of in France, if you throw your dog through the window, you get fined. I think it's 5,000 euros, and you can get up to 2 years in prison. Your dog or your cat, a pet. So what is the message it's sending to the Jewish community of France and of the world is that, you know what? You can throw a Jew out the window and walk free, but not a dog. So now again, we're lesser than animals.
Yeah,
we're vermin. We're subhuman. As going back to the
Holocaust.
And
what you just said is it leaves a tone, it leaves a flavor that and emboldens those to be like, oh, well, if that's the case, I'll just claim that I was, or maybe I will go smoke pot. Or so with that same reasoning, I guess all these guys that were on drugs down the Hamas, the Captagon drug out killing, they're on drugs. They shouldn't be tried.
Or they don't have. Well, that's right. Well, they don't have to worry about accountability because they're actually being praised for what they're doing by their own government, so they're not going to be arrested or anything. So demonization of the defenders. What's happening right now is that try to go walk in the middle of a pro-Hamas, or I should say pro-Palestinian protest anywhere in the world right now and walk with a flag of Israel. You don't even have to be Jewish,
or keep.
But you don't even have to be Jewish. You're brandishing a flag of Israel.
Well, the one guy got killed. Remember, he got hit with the megaphone.
Right, and I don't know I think he was Jewish. Paul Kessler, okay. in L.A. Yeah, I think. I mean, maybe not, but he was definitely in that group of pro-Israel.
Like you said, it doesn't matter if you're holding an Israeli flag.
Right now you're being demonized, and the next one, persecution of Jews and defenders. The demonization and persecution is a reality now. Going back to one thing I wanted to talk about in the under the education and the reporting. Is the 3Ds of Natan Sharansky. I don't know if you know. Natan Sharansky is a Soviet refusenik. He came to Israel and he worked with the immigration department, and he's still alive. He actually spoke at the DC rally recently, and he came up with I haven't found anything better. As of yet, I use it all the time. He came up with the 3Ds to define if a person or an action is anti-Semitic. Okay. Demonization, delegitimization, and double standards. If it fits any of those or all three, it's anti-Semitic. The demonization of the Jews or Israel, making them into a people group or a person that's evil. Or the delegitimization is saying that Israel doesn't have the right to exist. Jews should go somewhere else. Or the double standards. I mean, when I say double standards, I have the word UN flashing in front of my head.
100%.
Okay.
It's sick.
So the double standards are just mind-boggling. I mean, how Israel is singled out by so many, not just at the UN, but so demonization, delegitimization, or double standards. If any of those three apply to an event or something a person said, or then it's anti-Semitism. And let me say it because a lot of people tell me, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm anti-Zionist. Well, I have yet to find an anti-Zionist who's not anti-Semitic. I'm not saying it's impossible. Mm-hmm. You can be anti-Zionist. Politically, you can, fine-tune the definition, but all anti-Zionists that I have talked to or watched or heard to date are basically anti-Semites wearing a cloak of anti-Zionism, but they're not fooling me.
It sounds, more palpable that, I'm just, I'm not against Jews in general, let them go live in Uganda. I'm just against them living in Israel or whatever. And you go, no, in reality, again, there's that subtle subtle hatred there. Or, well,
You know, the Jews were also, they were offered Uganda.
I do, yeah.
Before in 1948. They were offered another place. You know what the other place is? Madagascar.
Were they really?
Yes, it's convenient. It's an island. We can ghetto, you know.
Yeah.
We can put the Jews,
there it is, right?
You know?
There it is.
Yes.
You know, how consistent. Well, let's talk about probably, you know, we've established certainly some of the wickedness and the evil and the basis and the foundations for some of this, but the goal isn't to leave people there. The goal is to encourage a proper response. Let's talk about a proper response. You wrote about this in the book, and let's define it. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so during the war, during the Second World War, not the Third World War that we're in right now, right? I mean, well, by the way, when do you define a war? When do we say it's a Third World War? Not yet?
No, it's always historical. You're always looking back.
You look back. Okay, all right. See, I knew you were going to teach me something today. All right. So during the war, there was a group of people, and to date, they've identified about maybe 55,000 of them. It's not that many. The Yad Vashem in Israel, the Holocaust Memorial, has identified righteous Gentiles who helped Jews during Second World War.
Like Schindler's List, right?
Schindler was one, Corrie ten Boom, Raoul Wallenberg,
Dietrich
Bonhoeffer, all those guys, all those Gentiles who risked their lives to help Jewish people, didn't take any money, and they were not Jewish, and they risked their lives to help them. So these became known as the righteous among the nations, or the righteous Gentiles. And again, there's probably 55,000 in the world. They keep finding them, but not that many. You know, a lot of them are dead now. So when these are recognized as righteous Gentiles, the highest honor they can get is this medal. And then when they die, they become honorary members, citizens of Israel.
Oh, wow.
So it's the highest honor they can get. And so these were during the wars, during the Second World War. And I've been looking at this passage in Matthew, which is, I think it's Matthew 25, 31 through 46, the parable of the goats and the sheep. And here we have a passage where Yeshua is speaking to what I believe is a group of Gentiles who were left behind, went through the tribulation, survived the tribulation. And actually, when you see the passage, there's two groups. The sheep are the ones who actually help Jewish people, rescued them, sheltered them, clothed them, fed them, protected them. And when Yeshua comes back at the end of the tribulation, he looks at these people and said, for what you did to the least of these brethren of mine, which I believe means Jewish people according to the flesh, as Jesus was a Jew in the flesh, you did to me. And so he said, no, you get to enter into the millennial kingdom. You know, here, don't collect 200, go straight into the millennial, straight in. And then he talks to the goats, and that's the other side of the coin. To the extent that you didn't do any of those things, you go to the lake of fire. And so I believe that you and I are going to be, I mean, the believers, not just you and I, but the believers are going to be raptured before the tribulation. But it doesn't matter if you think you're going to go through the tribulation, if you think you're going to be raptured before the wrath of God, 2/3, 3/4 tribulation, wherever you fit. It doesn't matter. There's a principle of being saved, becoming a child of God, becoming a Christian, and seeing that God has a plan for the Jews, and He loves the Jewish people, the apple of His eye, Zechariah 2:8. And when you see that, and you want to help the Jewish people, that principle can be lifted from that passage. And if it's in the future, which I believe it is, the principle can be applied today to Gentile Christians who love God, they love the Bible, and if you love God, if you love the Bible, you love God. And if you love the Bible, you love God, you love Israel, because that's all throughout the pages of the Bible. So why not have Christians today, and I call them the new righteous among the nations, why don't have Christians look at what they can do to come to the rescue of Jewish people today? Because that's where we are, I believe, in the history of our society.
I mean, we could use that principle that Jesus is making a determination. Again, these people aren't saved by their works, they're saved by faith, but this is the fruit of their faith. But we could say that the principle there is anything pre-second coming, right? It's before his, anything is before his second coming when he puts his feet on the ground. And so that principle certainly would apply to any time at all before his second coming, including the tribulation, which would be the context, but anytime.
But before.
Anytime before.
But in light of October 7th, now more than ever.
Now more than ever. So let's talk about the. Also, we talked earlier. Right now, we're seeing people in America, even again crazy, realizing that wow. I read several articles recently where there were some very prominent Jewish businessmen that were feeling that I might sell everything and move to Israel because even in my local community, I'm not feeling safe. I mean, you think about living in Detroit or some of these other places where these places are. So, what can, right now, if you a Jewish or a righteous Gentile, what can they do right now? We talked earlier about potential for being part of a list or whatever.
Right.
Talk about that.
So right now, there is a the Christians have to ask themselves. They examine their hearts, and if they find themselves in a place where they go, I want to do something for the Jewish people. I mean, you can send money to Israel. There's different ways you can make donations to help with the war effort, and that's good. That shouldn't stop. But we have 7 million Jews in America. That's half of the Jewish population of the world. Okay, and I don't see this wave of anti-Semitism decreasing. I see it increasing because of all those reasons why they're not being punished. They're being emboldened and empowered, and so Christians are going to have a chance to, and it sounds a little judgmental, but to redeem their ancestors who during the Second World War were bystanders who, I always say a bystander only facilitates the work of a perpetrator. If you're a bystander, if you don't do anything, whoever does something bad, you're encouraging them. You have to speak up. You have to, silence is complicity.
Yeah.
So Christians are going to have a chance to do something, and do what? Well, we're at the place where you might consider opening your home, or if you live on a large property with a barn that's made into an office when you can put beds or whatever it is. So I can connect Christians who are interested in helping that way to a network that's been growing. And basically, if people email me at Olivier Melnick 4 truth@gmail.com. Olivier Melnick.
Maybe spell it for people because this is audio. A lot of people are doing this.
Okay, so it's my first and
not
last
Oliver.
name. You got that right. The only person who is allowed to call me Oliver, you know who that is Arnold Fruchtenbaum.
Oh, really?
As a joke.
Oh, okay.
And that's, you don't mess with Arnold.
Yeah, exactly. So spell it for me.
Okay, it's Olivier Melnick, Melnick 4 truth@gmail.com. Olivier Melnick for truth@gmail.com. You email me and I will put you in touch with that network. You will be receiving some instructions and you'll be asked some questions. And basically, we ask people questions. The network asks questions like, are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? Do you drive a truck? Do you fly a plane? Do you have property? And so, and they're put in different states. So now that network is able to help Jewish people in an area and put them somewhere for a night, a day, a week, we don't know. And I pray that we never have to get to that place, but I don't think it's a reality.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting because some of the things that we're seeing going on now as it relates to the state of Israel, it's kumbaya is not coming, in the sense of just peace. Jesus is, well, we know it will come when Jesus is here, but what I'm saying is
the next kumbaya is going to be the Antichrist, but
right.
It's a fake kumbaya.
Right. So this idea that Israel is currently surrounded by enemies, that they until they're eliminated or subjugated in some ways, they're not going to stop. And so the fact is they're going to continue their attacks, and which means Israel's going to have to continue to respond appropriately, which is going to create, again, all the ramifications out there amongst the world that are going to use those double standards, call for a ceasefire when people are getting murdered. So I don't envision, I envision this, as you just said, getting far worse because as we're entering the end times, anti-Semitism will increase because we know that it's full blown during the tribulation.
Yes, it could continue to increase, absolutely. And there might be, there probably will be some respite at the beginning of the tribulation when the Antichrist, Daniel 9:27, when he signs a peace treaty with Israel, which incidentally, and I don't know where you fit on this. This is where I see Gog and Magog between the beginning of the tribulation and the abomination of desolation. I don't know if you have a different view on that.
Well, that's a different topic.
It's a different topic altogether. That's
We
right.
could go down that one.
Yeah, we have another hour.
But nevertheless, we, like you said, there's no doubt the Antichrist is in covenant with them.
Right.
And so they have his support.
It's a covenant of peace. So Israel is going to feel at peace for a while. So it might even be that anti-Semitism might be punished in a very big way, and then Israel is going to go like, oh, this is it. Maybe this guy is the Messiah.
Yeah.
He's not claiming to be the Messiah, but maybe they're going to think that. And then, of course, have tribulation, all hell breaks loose.
Yep. So let's wrap it up here in the sense of, kind of before we were talking, where's the gospel in all this? I mean, just specifically, what is the gospel, and then how do you, the average church person who embraces the gospel, we want to leave them with hope. We also want to leave them with truth. Maybe somebody's been listening to this and going, "Wow, what do they mean by gospel?"
Well, first of all, one big misconception that we have, that people have in many churches, is that the Jewish people, by virtue of being Jewish, are saved. They're God's people. They're God's, the apple of God's eyes, the chosen people. And there's a lot of good things said about Israel. So people say, well, I'm not going to worry. I'm not going to bother sharing the gospel with the Jewish people because, hey, at the end, all Israel will be saved. Romans 11. But this is really speaking of the end of the tribulation. Any Jews who dies without the good news of Yeshua's death and resurrection for them is bound for the lake of fire for eternity. So the Jewish people, just like the Palestinians, just like Hamas, just like you and I did, need Yeshua. They need Jesus. And so the gospel is the same for everybody. If the Jews were in by virtue of being Jewish, then we wouldn't have that passage in John 3 of, between Nicodemus and Yeshua, who,
must be born again.
Nicodemus is like super Jew. He's the
teacher.
He's the teacher of Israel. He's a Pharisee, he's Sanhedrin. He's done it all. And Jesus says, well, that's just not enough. You got to be born again. So all people need to be born again, including Jewish people. So my people need the gospel. What I've been doing since I've been a believer for 40 years is trying to help my people understand that Yeshua is Jesus. Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel. And actually, if you look in the Bible, all the prophecies of the Old Testament, of the Tanakh, the Jewish Bible, they all point to only one possible outcome, one possible person, Yeshua of Nazareth. So I challenge my Jewish people to look at all the prophecies that talk about a Redeemer or a Savior, because they all paint the picture, not by name, but by ministry. They paint the picture of Yeshua the Messiah. And what did he do for you that he did for me, that he can do for them, is that he was without sin. He gave his own life. He died on the cross and he rose again, and he's going to return. And all we have to do is to believe that he did it on your behalf, on my behalf. Just believe that he died for your sins. It's a free gift. There's nothing to do. Yeah. That's when I remember when the young girl who became my wife led me to the Lord. She told me, she said, you don't have anything to do. You just have to believe. All
I have to do is receive. Yeah,
you receive the free gift of salvation. And I did, and that's all. You don't have to be in a church building. You don't have to be giving a donation somewhere. You don't have to cut your right arm or your left leg.
Right.
You just have to believe that Yeshua, Jesus, died for your sins, the innocent for the guilty. And because of that, by his blood shed on the cross, we can accept that free gift and be saved and spend eternity with God.
Yeah. I mean, here we are. And the fact of the matter is, and if somebody has truly put their faith and trust in the Jewish Jesus as Savior and Lord, then the fruit of that is going to be, again, recognizing that God's covenant with them. Again, they still need to be saved through him, and we know that's going to happen. But in the meantime, we should be approaching it from a theological and biblically accurate perspective, which means, again, even if we didn't have that, we would still be against any sort of racism in general.
Right.
I mean, that's the right thing to do.
People of goodwill, yeah.
Yeah, people of goodwill. So anyways, well, I encourage everybody... get Olivier's book, The Normalization of Antisemitism. Again, I would even encourage you to use it as a Bible study. This is not going away.
No.
And what you've done here is helpful, because you not only shared the challenge, but you gave the solution, and that's what we're working to.
I'm trying to, yes. And Yeah. Well, thank you.
Olivia, thanks for being here, and thanks for listening today to the Prophecy Watchers podcast. As always, encourage you to continue to pray for us. We could not be here without prayer. We know that God has to be at the center of everything we're doing, and prayer is the most important. Also, another reminder, OrlandoProphecySummit.com. Come join us in Orlando, February 29th, March 1st, that weekend. And thanks for listening. See you next time.
Shalom.
Shalom.